What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one, I want to break down what's happening with Tesla, SPY, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers, and break down what's happening with the economic calendar moving forward. Talk about some big factors involving Canada imposing new tariffs for EVs, and also what we're seeing on the charts moving forward. Just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. Anyways, for Tesla, I just want to note that if you just ignore everything, just look at the levels, you'll see that Tesla had a high up here at 228. We came down, then we made a lower high at 225. Then we came down, then we ended up making a lower high. Now, before I had this drawn out a little bit differently, I had this drawn out like this resistance up here. So I was thinking in my video yesterday that Tesla might push a little bit, try to get close to this resistance and maybe come back down if you rejected. Instead, we came just short of that. We came just a little bit short of hitting that resistance. So we could redraw this trend line like this now as our next resistance. And you can see how Tesla is rejecting. We had three big rejections on Tesla. Tesla's continuing to make lower highs. But the question is, will we break the low from Thursday? If we break that low, that's going to be a big sign that Tesla's going to be looking for a big dip, and that could take us all the way down to not only 208, but potentially down to this imbalance towards the low 200s. So the question is, will the inverse cup and handle play out? Will we lose key supports? Yes, it depends on different factors, but I'll break down more information about this in just a couple of minutes. Let's first talk about some news, what's happening with the data for tomorrow, and the news about Tesla. Then I'll talk about the charts. So, for those who are concerned about the whole situation involving Israel, Iran, Hezbollah, and all these different parties, I just want to say that right now, things are seeming to be cooling off just a little bit. I wouldn't necessarily say that this means that this is an official ceasefire or we're done with. But what's good about this news is the fact that both sides seem to be stepping back from attacking each other. And this could be a sign that, and there's a very, very good chance, in my opinion, that this doesn't develop into a massive war. I really hope that ends up not being the case. That would be good for, the markets. That would be good for, everyday citizens, and the list goes on. So hopefully there's a ceasefire. Hopefully both sides step back and we see, a much more, a less, I would say, violent situation, if anything. So I really hope that ends up being the case. So far, so good. We'll see how this develops, at least as time goes on. Just so you guys know, if this does develop into a massive war, it's going to affect oil and then the markets. But for now, because it hasn't developed like that, it's not really having as big of an effect on the markets. So hopefully it just remains that way. Now, for news about the markets for tomorrow is going to be Tuesday, August 27th, 2024. One important thing worth noting is that we have very minor data in the morning at 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have some house price data, which is very minor. The main time to watch for data and volatility for the markets will be around the hour of 10 a.m. So at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have consumer confidence, the Richmond Fed manufacturing numbers. Then at 10:30 a.m., we have the Dallas Fed services and services revenues data. So all of that's going to be important. Look for some volatility at that time. Besides that, I'm not really seeing much else for tomorrow, but there might be some volatility at the 10 o'clock a.m. hour. Besides that, for earnings, we just have some minor bank earnings, nothing too crazy for tomorrow. But the main thing that's coming out is going to be on Wednesday. We have Nvidia's earnings. That's going to have a big effect on Tesla and the markets. So get ready for that. And then besides Nvidia's earnings, right now, the fear and greed index is neutral. We were getting very, very close to greed, only to slow down a little bit because tech is leading the market down. And with tech slowing down, this could be a big shift that could be coming. Now, right now, we're neutral. The market's not super bullish or super bearish. I actually agree with that when you look at the setups, which I'll show you in a few minutes. Momentum is currently greedy. It's slowing down just a little bit, not as greedy as before because of how we saw the S&P 500 see a slight rejection. So we'll see if that lasts. Two more things. The puts and call option positioning is starting to become stagnant because people are about to be making a decision. Are we going to load up on puts or are we about to buy more calls? There's going to be a big shift right now. We are starting to see them buying less calls than before, and investors are becoming a little bit more apprehensive. And then the VIX is still neutral. It hasn't broken key resistance yet. It hasn't lost key support. It's kind of stuck in the middle, so we'll give it some time. Now, a couple more things. There's currently a 68% chance we get a 25 basis point cut from the Fed and a 32% chance we get a 50 basis point cut. The market's expecting a 100% chance we get some kind of cuts, whether it's 25 or 50 basis points. That remains the same. When it comes to news involving Tesla, I didn't see much news come out involving Tesla, but I did see this, which was contributing to why we saw some declines in the EV sectors. Canada is going to be imposing 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs, including Teslas. So this includes Tesla, which is a very, very big piece of news. There's also going to be a 25% tariff on Chinese steel from Canada. Not to mention, I think that also includes aluminum. So we're starting to see a lot of commodities being taxed. Essentially, these imports are going to be a lot more. They're going to be taxed by a bigger margin, and then when that happens, of course, it's going to have a big effect on Tesla and the entire sector. So it's worth mentioning because of the competition involving China. That's very, very huge. Volume was only about 59 million. Part of why we dropped is because of the news involving Canada and what Justin Trudeau announced. And then we're seeing a little bit more shorting on Tesla. We saw short volume go up to about 64%. The last thing worth mentioning is that Baird, Piper Sandler still have their overweight ratings for Tesla, saying Tesla will outperform the markets eventually. The price price ratio is becoming more stagnant. Tesla was outperforming the market. Now it's slowing down a little bit. And Tuesdays are green about 51% of the time historically. We tend to see more volatility at around 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's very volatile. Also during open, Tesla tends to be very volatile. So during those two time frames, I'd be looking for volatility. And then we'll see how things go. Anyways, that is it for my data. That's it for news involving the markets and Tesla. I basically just went over the main headline. Now I just want to focus on the charts and nothing else from here on out. So for Tesla, I just want to mention the 4 hour is showing some weakness as we're barely holding support, but the daily chart on Tesla is looking a little bit weaker. We're also barely holding that 212 area. So the daily has the 50 EMA support at 212, and then the 4 hour also has, I think, the 200 EMA right there as well at the 212 area. So we have a double support near 212. That's critical support for Tesla. So hypothetically, when it comes to levels, if Tesla loses 212, you're going to be looking for this 210 area, the low from Thursday to hold. If we lose that, we're going to be looking at 208, followed by a big dump down to about 202 on Tesla. This also has an inverse cup and handle, so that does suggest that that's a little bit more probable in my opinion. However, if we somehow get a good piece of news, because Tesla is very news sensitive, and we end up breaking past 215, I'll be looking for 217, and eventually a move back up to 220. Those are going to be your resistance levels. In my opinion, when you consider the fact that we have an inverse cup and handle and the fact that we're making lower highs, the odds favor a test of 210 tomorrow, a little bit of a dip, and we'll see if Tesla gets a bounce or not off that support, because we did dip to 210 on Thursday and then just got a big bounce. So we'll see if Tesla loses this or not. If we do lose this, look for a bigger dump. In my opinion, there's going to be a risk of that as we have this imbalance to fill, so I'll be watching this carefully. I presume we're going to be dipping down to 210. We'll see if we lose that or not. If we lose that, that's your confirmation for a bigger dump. But watch that support just to be safe, in my personal opinion. But we do look a little bit more bearish on Tesla nonetheless. For SPY, now don't turn too bearish. Just because we had a red day, don't turn too bearish. Don't turn too bullish either. We're still in our range. Now, if SPY breaks the all-time high, this thing is going to be pushing a lot more. We'll be looking for basically 565 to 563 to break, then look for 565, then 566, 568, and levels like that. If we lose our low, okay, SPY is going to be looking for 558 as our support. If that fails us, we're looking for 555 to 556, that range down here. If the lows from Thursday break, this thing is going to dump all the way down to about 552, then the 550s and some gap fills in the 540s. A bigger dump will come. So I just want to call out that in my video yesterday, I mentioned that we might push a little bit, and then we'll be watching resistance between 563 to 565. Every time we hit that historically, we did reject on SPY, and that's why we ended up getting that rejection. But whether or not we get a big rejection, I presume is going to be determined by Nvidia. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to likely remain range bound until we get Nvidia's earnings on Wednesday. So I think my prediction for tomorrow is, so make sure you watch your levels to be safe. But I think we're going to be dipping a little bit towards that 558 area. And then we could go a little bit lower, but we'll see if we reclaim that or not. And I think we're just going to remain in this range, and we're going to end up trying to hold 555 to 556 just for the time being. Now, we could lose it depending on the news and Nvidia's earnings, but for the time being, the market remains range bound. And I think that's most likely what's going to be the case. When you look at ES, we have something very similar developing. We're range bound between 5600 and 5650. If we break 5650, you're looking for 5680. If we lose 5600 flat, we're going to be looking for 5980, followed by much bigger drops to the mid 550s. I think what's going to happen tomorrow is we dip a little bit closer to 5600, then we try to rebound, and we just consolidate in that range. I think that's the most likely possibility. Nvidia is going to make an interesting move as well. I think that we're also range bound on Nvidia. Every time we hit this like 223 to 224 area for the last 5-6 days, Nvidia gets bought back up, and every time we hit 130 or the low 130s, we get rejected. I presume we're just going to continue to do that, going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. I wouldn't be surprised if we dip a little bit towards 124.7 or a little bit lower, then we get bought back up and just continue to trade sideways. I think Nvidia is going to most likely do that. So look for a little bit of a dip and see if we end up rebounding. I'll be watching to see if that ends up being the case. For Bitcoin's dipping a little bit. If we don't hold above 63,361, there's going to be a dip down to about 62,500. If we hold above this, we could try to rebound. But I think that with the double top forming and the fact that we're below 63,361, the odds are favoring the 62,000s for Bitcoin for a little bit of a dip for the time being. And if we end up continuing to lose 62,500, I'll look at the 50 EMA, then this imbalance, which is very close to our 200 EMA. But for now, Bitcoin looks a little bit more bearish. For NQ, for those who are interested, we look even more bearish than a SPY, ES, and the others because tech is what's leading the market down right now. So we have a head and shoulders on NQ, but don't turn too bearish just because you see a pattern. That's a very important trading lesson because patterns, as of recent, tend to be full of traps sometimes, not always, sometimes. So you want to be very careful and double minded. How do we know we're going to be dipping lower? If we maintain this bearish structure down to our 200 EMA and lose this like 19,400 area, I presume we're going to be dipping all the way down to the low 19,000s for a big dump. If we lose 19,400, that's your confirmation. Now, we already had this move to the downside. I did talk about how we may make a lower high already, so this wasn't necessarily a surprise, but the question is, will the surprise continue? And then that's going to be determined by our levels. If we break 19,500, we turn back up to 19,700. Whether this plays out depends on Nvidia's earnings, if this is a trap or not. But I think that so far we are favoring downside, and we look like we might be dipping closer to our 200 EMA towards 19,400. So I think there might be a little bit more of a dip coming to NQ, but whether or not we break key support and see a bigger dump depends on Nvidia's earnings. For the QQQ, I see the same thing, same setup, almost exactly. We have a head and shoulders like structure. If we break 478, we're going to be pushing up to 480. If we lose 473 to 472, and the reason I'm calling out 472 is because our 50 EMA is trying to play a game of catch up. So that 472 to 473 area is going to be our support. If we lose that, we're going all the way down to 468 and 464 to fill this imbalance. I think technicals look a little bit more bearish. They do favor downside for 472 tomorrow. We'll see if we consolidate around there. And if we do lose this, we will be dipping lower. Technicals do favor downside, but this also depends on Nvidia's earnings. So we'll see how it goes. But so far, we do look more bearish on NQ and the QQQ as tech is leading us down. For Apple, we're just range bound. We have 228 as resistance. Every time we hit this, we reject. And then 223.8 to 224 is our support. Every time we hit that, we have been bouncing. I think what's going to happen is we dip tomorrow back down to the 224s, get bought back up, and just continue to trade sideways. If we were to break 228, we're looking for 230. If we lose 223.8, we're going to be looking for 222 and 220. I presume we're just going to stay in the middle between the range, not really do a whole lot. For other tickers out there, I just want to mention that Palantir is looking a little bit more bearish. We had a double top leg structure followed by more downside. If we manage to break past 31, I'd be looking for 31.62. If we end up losing 30.5, we're going to be looking for a dip all the way down towards 29.4. So we have this bearish looking structure that's developing. There's a double top right over here, and I think that there's a good chance we may dip lower. So I think Palantir looks a little bit more bearish. We got to reclaim 30.9. If not, we're going to continue to dip. So that looks more bearish to me. For Supermicro, I thought yesterday this is going to likely be more like range bound, kind of pop a bit then drop. So I was right about the direction, but it dropped even more than what I was expecting. So I was thinking we dipped to like 600, if not like 580 at the lowest. But we actually went even lower. So I was talking about this imbalance taking us down to 580. We made it there, but then we dipped even more than what I was expecting. So we're looking at 580's resistance. We could get very close to that tomorrow. And then if we reject it, continue lower, our next target is going to be basically 546 is support, followed by the 520s. So I think what's going to happen is we rebound a little bit into the 570s, 576 to 580. Then maybe we see a continuation lower as the most likely possibility towards this wick in the 550 area. For Rivian is showing some more life as it's trying to rebound. I said yesterday we might be pushing for 14.8, then dip back down towards this 200 EMA. I think what's going to happen is we're going to dip a little bit, get closer to the lower 14s, then we'll see if we bounce and continue higher. We did get some negative news involving EVs, so obviously it's not affecting Rivian as much, but this is attempting to break out. So I think what's going to happen is we might dip a little bit on Rivian, get close to our 200 EMA, then try to rebound. I'll be watching to see if that ends up being the case. For SoFi, we're looking at 7.8 as resistance. If that breaks, we're looking for $8. If we lose support at 7.5, we're looking for a dip all the way down towards 7.4 and 7.2. I think what's going to happen is This might dip a little bit towards 7.5 because typically when you get a breakout, you retest it. So we might be testing 7.5 tomorrow. We'll see if we bounce or not off of that. So it might be a little retracement, and we'll see if we bounce. For the IWM Russell 2000, we have basically 221 and 222 as resistances. If we don't hold above 220, we're looking for 218. I think what's going to happen is 220 might be tested. If it doesn't hold, we're going to be dipping. So there might be a little dip coming. We'll see what kind of reaction we get if 220 fails us. So be very, very careful. For AMD, AMD is basically getting rejected off this yellow trend line right over here. If we end up losing 149, we're going to be looking for a dip all the way down towards 147, followed by 145. Now we have resistance at 149 point. I'm sorry, 152.53. We got to reclaim 152 to turn back up. Otherwise, we favor the downside. So I think we're going to be testing 149.21. We'll see if that holds or not. If we don't hold that, we may just continue to dip. So we'll see how this ends up going. But I do see a risk of downside for ARM. I'm sorry, I was talking about AMD, not ARM. AMD is the one that has the downside potential. For ARM now, we also have downside potential, but it's for a different reason. So AMD has ARM, excuse me, guys. ARM is what I'm talking about. I keep mixing these up. ARM is the one that has this downside potential because of this bearish engulfing candle. If we don't reclaim 129.5, we're going to likely be dipping down to 25. And I have a feeling that that's going to likely be the most likely case. We got to reclaim 131 to turn back up, but this is favoring a move back down to 125 after getting a bearish engulfing candle with that bearish divergence. So it's looking more bearish to me. For others out there, for Coinbase, Coinbase is attempting to dip a little bit, but we're going to be looking at 203 as our main support. If 203 fails right here, we're going to likely be dipping all the way down to 200, then 197. If we reclaim 205, we'll be looking for a pushback up towards the 210 area. So I'm favoring 200 and 197 as our supports, and I think that we're going to likely test those, especially as we're below our 50 EMA. So I think 200 and 197 are coming for coin. For Amazon, we're looking a little bit more bearish because we have a head and shoulders like structure. And you guys see the big white line I have drawn there? We lost this key support. See how this was holding us up since the uptrend started? Since early August, that was holding us up, and we got this rejection. And we're losing our 50 EMA. The yellow line right there is getting lost. So we got to reclaim 176.7 for the turn back up. Otherwise, we are favoring the downside. And I think that this imbalance is going to fill. I think Amazon will be dipping down to 172 most likely. Now, don't turn overly bearish. These stocks could dip a bit, but Nvidia's earnings is going to determine whether or not that continues. For Meta, we're looking at 522 as resistance. If we don't reclaim that, we may continue to dip towards 515, then 508. I'm favoring downside off the double top and bearish divergence that has been developing. For Microsoft, it's the same thing essentially. We have a bearish divergence and a rejection. We did almost exactly what I predicted. So I said we might retest these EMAs, then reject. That's what happened so far. So now it looks more bearish. I do think we might be dipping lower. We need to reclaim 415 to turn back up. Otherwise, we're at risk of dipping. And if 412 breaks, I'm going to be looking for basically 408, which is where this imbalance is. So I think we're going to be dipping to 408. For Google's also looking like it's just range bound. If we were to lose 166, we're looking for 165. Lose that, we turn bearish. Break 168, we could be looking for 170. We're stuck in the middle, so I think we're going to likely continue to do that. So I think we could push a little bit higher tomorrow. We do look a little bit more bullish. We could be looking for the 168s and then a move back down and just some sideways price action. We're just range bound. For GameStop, we look more bearish. We have this imbalance to fill, so I think the most likely possibility is we dip towards 20.8. For AMC, there's a bearish divergence. We're looking for 5.03 to be tested tomorrow. If we hold this, we could bounce. If we lose that, we're going down to 4.97. Might dip a little bit. DJT is looking a little bit more bearish, but we're barely going to be testing supports tomorrow at 21.36. So look for a little bit of a dip. If we hold 21.36, we bounce. If not, we dip lower. So watch for that. The VIX is also looking a little bit weaker, but I'm going to be looking for one possibility. So this is just a hypothetical situation. The VIX might try to pop a little bit as the market's dipping, but the question is, are we about to form a head and shoulders? Is this like our left shoulder? Is this our head? Are we about to form like a right shoulder like this? If that's the case, if this is a head and shoulders, this could imply that the VIX is about to get a rug pull and Nvidia might pump the markets up. Not a guarantee. I don't know for sure, guys. It depends on Nvidia, of course. As of right now, this is just consolidating, but there's a possible head and shoulders developing on the VIX, which could signify the possibility of the market getting a big bounce after Nvidia's earnings. So we'll see. I'm not going to promise it. Don't take this as the only reason why you'd make a trade, you want to look at many confluences. But I'm just saying that this is a possibility. There could be a head and shoulders, and if that does play out, that could be a sign. But just keep that in the back of your mind just in case. The 10 years kind of flat, not really doing much. The dollar's approaching resistance at a 101, so we'll see what the reaction is, and we'll be very patient nonetheless. Anyways, that's pretty much it for my video. As far as Tesla goes, we're looking a little bit more bearish, making lower highs, unfortunately. We have not lost critical support for Tesla to really start dipping, though, so I wouldn't turn way too bearish yet. I'd rather wait and see what the test gives us. That's why there's going to be a big test tomorrow or by the next couple of days. So that being said, thank you all so much for listening. Have a great day, night, or evening, wherever you guys are around the world. And I'll see you guys very soon on the next one tomorrow before the market opens. Thank you for listening, and peace out.